dear family, Lauren and my 2 boys, my 2 girls, and my good friend Raymond Johnson, who's been busy this weekend setting up my campaign headquarters at Roosevelt and Timuquana. You clean up nice, Raymond. You've done well there. We are congregants at St. John's Presbyterian. That is a Bible-based church on Herschel Street over in Fairfax. But in the very few moments that I will spend with you this morning, I wanted to give you a couple highlights of my personal faith journey. I grew up in Venetia, which many of you know is between Ortega and the Base, and grew up there with my twin sister. And I was born first, as for Austin and Justin's benefit. You always know who's born first. Yeah. And grew up in a loving family environment there. Not necessarily an overly religious household, but we got ourselves to church. But as a small boy, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I found myself often stealing away, and as I recall, often on a Sunday morning, maybe on a Sunday we didn't get ourselves to church, with the family Bible. And our family Bible, Jack, could you hold that book up there? Was a lot bigger than that book right there. In fact, our family Bible, I look at these seat cushions back here. To me, they were about that big, with a big gold cover and gold leaves around it. And in the front, you could write everything about your family: who was born, who was baptized, who lived, who moved, who you knew, what you ate for lunch. All those good things was there. But as a little boy, without being told, without being instructed, I would sneak away to the converted garage. We called it a rec room. And I would sit there and I would, in my own little boy way, pray and experience a holiness that I, to this day, think about. Now, the years go on, I grow up, and I lived in an environment where it was important to be a very good moral, upstanding person. And I appreciate that. I also happened, our family attended a church where being a moral, good person was very important. We told stories about how good it is to be good, and morality is important, and stories from the Bible tell us how to be morally good. But I bet you know, as I learned, as I grew up to be a man, that you can only get so far being morally good. That tank of gas will run out on you. And when it does, how good you are, how much your self-esteem works, how much your sense of me can work, will fail you every time. And I found myself going through my early years, my young adult years and my early adult years, running into these instances where I'd hit emptiness. Has anyone felt emptiness? Voidness out there? You're on your track, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're being a moral man, you may be in church, but your sense of morality and coexisting in the world doesn't help when you meet life's challenges, when you find things that, like we all do, when we find opportunities where we're suffering. And being a good moral person would leave me in these empty places. And being young and being around a nice family, you get through these things. And started with a nice career, ran off to some places to get educated, to see what they knew, but I always came back home to work. And as a younger man in my 20s, being a good moral person, I was at a men's group. Men who I'm sure had faith way more developed than I did. But remember, I was still back on my more adolescent sense of you got to be a good person kind of guy. That's what the message of all this is. I was in this men's group, and there was a lecturer there that day who happened to be from California, from Berkeley, which is, we all know what Berkeley's like. But he was a science professor from Berkeley in California, Berkeley. And he was explaining how when he was brought out to Berkeley in science, he was told to taught the evolution classes. And so he thought, well, if he was going to teach evolution, he better learn all about it so he can teach it. And what he learned, and maybe what you know as well, is that what the pop culture tells you about evolution, where we come from, has no real basis of evidence at all. However, the world says different things about that. But he did this in a very reasoned, kind of analytical way, and it hit me. It hit me that maybe I didn't understand what was true in this world and what wasn't. Because I'd grown up in a nice moral environment, a nice little day school, nice friends, but subtle messages that the culture is one thing, and go to church over here, be a good person, you'll be fine. And probably some subtle messages that we came from somewhere other than the Lord that I didn't think a lot of as I grew up, but they were there in little bitty ways that build up over time, and they corrupt your thinking. That lecture put me on the path to understand what the truth is. And I returned to my roots. I returned to the Bible to understand what is true. And in my analytical way, I would go through the apologetics courses and things that verify or confirm what may or may not be true, but ultimately come back to the actual truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that changed my life. That changed my life. I give thanks for all the great people I grew up with who gave me good messages. But I wish someone had explained that to me at a younger age. I wish someone could explain that to me at a younger age. Because now, being saved at that time and living my life thereafter, I treat suffering differently. It can be everyday suffering. It can be suffering brought on from circumstances of others or brought on by myself. But we handle it differently because we believe. When you suffer and you only have being a moral good person is good in this crazy world we live in, it's not going to help you. But if you can stand on the truth. I've had big things happen in my life. I loved our small banking business. We had about 10,000 customers, which was to us a lot of customers in the banking business. But in the scheme of things, it wasn't. During the financial crisis, the federal government said, well, companies like yours just aren't important. It's the big guys that we need to look out for. And our little bank, like all the others, had gone the way of the corner hardware store. That was a very difficult time for me, and I suffered. Even every day now, on the campaign trail, I'm running for the state house for this part of the county. There's a lot of rejection that goes on. Just last week, I went to a group looking for acceptance, and I was rejected. I'm a big boy, but that still hurts. It hurts. It makes you feel bad. But because I know the truth, I know that through suffering, we learn to persevere. And from that perseverance, we develop character. And from that, the hope of a greater future to come.